Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second ever episode of AngularFire Live. We're doing things a little bit differently today. I have a new microphone to start out with. So if that is giving you all any trouble, just let me know in the comments. So usually I try to balance out this show by doing live coding and talking and doing it all just at the same time is kind of crazy on your brain. So what I'm going to do in this episode is I'm going to be working on the app, diligently teaching, doing the best of my abilities. And then when I switch over to the browser, then I will address all of the questions you have. So I'm going to try to batch it. So like focus on code and then focus on chat when that's available. So keep sending me your messages. Just because I'm not immediately responding to them doesn't mean I'm not going to look at them. I just want to give you the most focused, best show I can give you. So let me know how that goes too, if you like that format. This is forever an experiment. So today we are going to continue on the ngconf app. We're going to move from last time we did the real-time Kanban boards where you could drag one thing. We use the Angular CDK and Firestore for that. And then on today's episode, we're going to add in authentication. So we're going to sign users in with Google. We're going to protect the routes for the project Kanban board. And then we're going to resolve that user data into the components because that user is retrieved asynchronously. And if we have it asynchronously via an observable, while RX and Angular gives us lots of great things with async pipe, it's kind of syntactically a little busy to always have to pipe async or ng if let user through every single one. So I really like to do route resolving. That's something that has been around with Angular forever, even since AngularJS days. So let's dive in. So I'm going to pull up the project. So the first thing you do when you want to install AngularFire Authentication is you go into a module. So I'm going to actually go into my main app module first. So the way that AngularFire is broken out is, and actually I want to make sure, okay, we're good. All right, I was afraid that my screen wasn't showing. I've done that many times before. So what we want to do here is we want to import from AngularFireAuth and also AngularFire itself, because none of that's here just yet. And the way that AngularFire is set up is it's set up into multiple packages. And that allows you to only import what you need, which is really important for page load performance. And also, there's no reason carrying things around your app you don't need. So what I like to do is like to separate out core Angular modules, my main kind of like app-specific modules, and then any components. This is just organizationally works for me. So AngularFire is an @Angular module, so I import it up here. So, no caps there. Import from Angular/Fire, and this is going to be the main AngularFire section. So here it's a AngularFire module. And then I also do this trick too, where if you do Control-Shift-Down, or is it Alt-Shift-Down in VS Code, it copies it. And in this case, it's really useful because of the naming convention we use in AngularFire. So that changes to AngularFireAuth module and then /auth. And then again, we're going to be using some route guards. So Alt-Shift-Down and then AngularFireAuth guard module -guard. So that's a nifty little trick. I am a big line copier with hotkeys and stuff. There's a couple other ones as well that work really well. But so let's start with initializing AngularFire. One thing I'm realizing I don't have now is environments, but I'll make sure to get that auto imported. So down here, I will write AngularFire module.initialize app, and then type environment.firebase. And then that auto imported for me. Which you see VS Code, I would like to hear your thoughts on this because I'm not really sure. And actually, I haven't really researched too much on how this works. I imagine there's some path resolving going on, how it can be some sort of absolute path, how it can know source is the root. but it's not even the root of this project, but it works and it looks a lot nicer than dot slashing. So if you know all about this, what this is called, I've seen it a lot and I've used it, but not really thought too much of it, just kind of taking it for granted. So if you know anything about it, let me know in the comments. All right, so I've initialized AngularFire, and so that is great, but now what I want to do is I want to initialize the auth module and the auth guard module. So auth module, and yet again, Alt-Shift down, auth guard. Cool, so now we have AngularFire auth, and AngularFire auth guard all set up, and I would say hopefully we don't have to go back to the app module, but I know we will, just one more time. All right, so let's save that. I'm going to pull up my command line, and let's go into here, and it's rebuilding, and it doesn't look like there's any errors, 93%. All right, compiled successfully. Great. So I would usually go run and test, but I'm going to have to switch screens. I'm doing this all locally today. Before I've done it in StackBlitz, I've used Code Sandbox, I've used a bunch of other stuff. But right now, I'm just trying this locally because I do a new setup every time. All right, cool. So this is an app module, and we want to now go into the, where is it? The landing page component. So if we go to our app routing module, one thing I want to show you is that we have two routes set up right now. We have a home route and like sort of our index route, and that goes to this landing page components. And then we have a project, with a project ID parameter, and that does a lazy load of the project module, which loads the project component. So we'll be in this file quite a bit, but we're going to do sign in now. So we want to go into this landing page component, and we have this sign in method that is hooked up to all the buttons on the page. Just click, and we just want to sign in. And that's pretty straightforward. So the first thing we do there is we import from @angular/fire/auth. And that gives us AngularFireAuth. And you want to be really careful here because I do this all the time. I know that sounds really basic, what I'm about to say, but a lot of times you import from AngularFireAuth module, and then when you inject the module, you won't get any methods on it because it doesn't have any methods. And so you're going to ask yourself, where's sign in anonymously, or where's all this stuff? And then it's frustrating. And then you realize, oh, I'm injecting a module. I do this probably at least once per session. All right, so we'll inject that as private. So private AF auth is AngularFireAuth. And the reason why that's private is because usually you don't want someone messing around with this in the templates. I really like to just kind of let my methods be my public interface to the template. That's just sort of my philosophy. All right, so now for sign in, we can say this.afauth.signin with redirect. And this is going to need a provider. And this is one of the few times where you're going to use the Firebase SDK with AngularFire. So the Firebase SDK is, mostly, with one of these few exceptions, abstracted away from you. And a lot of that has to do with our handling of zones with AngularFire. So with AngularFire and zones, we, with Firebase and zones, there's lots of stuff that happens in Firebase asynchronously. There's lots of background timers. There's all these, background network calls to make sure your data is syncing and checking your authentication state. And you can imagine lots and lots of stuff. And so if you don't watch what you're doing out of the box, Zone.js wants to pick up on all those things. And Zone.js wants to be like, oh, did you just do a background timer? I think it's time to re-render. But it's not time to re-render. So we have to block those out of the zone, or run them out of the zone, and then run the result of what we want back in zone. So that is a big part of what AngularFire does for you. So if you have a question like, why should I use Firebase, regular library versus AngularFire? The handling of zones within AngularFire is, in my opinion, by far and away the biggest reason why you would use it. Even though AngularFire gives you lots of really great convenience methods for syncing things as observables and whatnot, I the zone stuff is not something you'd want to do yourself. It's really tricky and easy to mess up. So, and we have all sorts of testing and stuff done to make sure that that stays good. So there you go. That was a fun tip I didn't think I was going to share. So now back to my main point. I'm going to import star as Firebase from, and this is very important, Firebase/app. Now, you might ask yourself, well, why am I importing from Firebase/app instead of Firebase/auth or just regular Firebase? So you never want to do this, like pretty much ever, like 99.999% of the times, because this is going to import everything. And that's going to just blow up your bundle because you're getting like 2 databases, an auth system, storage, callable functions. I don't know, messaging is a part of it, but a lot of stuff. You're getting a lot of stuff all at once, and that's just a bad loading pattern for any website. Even if you're using everything, you probably don't need to load it all at once. So you want to import from app because this is the core. This must be imported for everything with Firebase. And if you import app, anything that has been tacked on afterwards, like auth in this case, will be available on this Firebase instance. And we just need a static property of auth to get the providers, because all the providers are on the Firebase.auth. And so you say new Firebase.auth dot, and then you see GitHub auth provider, multi-factor, OAuth, phone provider, and for here we just say Google auth provider, and that's GitHub. If you provide the wrong provider and try to log in, stuff can get kind of crazy. So make sure you use the right provider. It's always really important. So what this does is it calls out and it initializes a redirect. And so the way a redirect works is that you start out by saying, okay, I'm on my own site. The site I own that I'm running this code on. And then this will make a call out, though, to your provider's login page. So the user can log in through that site. So in this case, through Google. So they'll log in through Google, and then Google will have these redirect URLs or callback URLs associated with your integration with them. And so they will call back to them with all this information. That is actually a really oversimplified version of OAuth. There's like several more round trips and stuff like that. But I really, yeah, OAuth is fun. But so you get your stuff back. But that brings in a really big question. If you have to make a call out to the site and then they have to make a call back to you with the user, anything beyond line 20 is not going to run. Like the code will not run because you're making a call out. You might try to quickly run, or I'm not really sure. We could try some crazy stuff, but you're going to get redirected. So there's no point of really trying to do this. And also what this means is you can't call .then on this promise and get the user back. This returns a promise because it keeps consistency across APIs, but we don't ever return or chain onto this promise. So if we can't return back, how do we get the user? Well, we do that with a method called getRedirectResult that's available on AngularFireAuth. So I say this.afauth.getRedirectResult. And then this right here returns a promise. And it returns a result. And it's important that it, it has, ends with result, but it returns a result. But don't think about it as it can return your user. It can return a lot of different things. But it also potentially returns a user, because this will be called when any user or anyone goes to the login or the landing page. And if they're not logged in, the result.user will be null. And so what we want to do is we want to check an if statement here and say if result.user is not equal to undefined or null, or, in this case, we want to route them away. So to do that, let's import from the router. So private router is router. Great. And then we can say this.router.navigate, and then I'm going to hard code it in for now because I haven't made the projects page yet. So I just want to go from login straight to the single hard coded project I have in this database. So /projects/ project/ AngularFire Live, I think is what I called it. Let's see if this works. So let's save. Let's check our console output, make sure it builds without any errors, compiled successfully, great. So now I'm going to switch into the comments. We'll talk about the comments for a little bit, and then also kind of run this at the same time. So let me go back into here. I'm trying to find my screens. I got too many screens open. All right, so let's stop sharing this one. Let me address the comments. All right, so we have, let's see here. Andreas was first. Good job, Andreas. Appreciate that. Gary, thank you for stopping by, Gary. And Hans, thank you for the Go David Go. I didn't see it, but I felt it, you know, like I felt like you were cheering me on. And I don't know how to block. You would have to phonetically spell that out for me, but hi. And Hans says, would it make sense to import all AngularFire modules within one singular AngularFire module? That, I'm glad you asked that, Hans, because it, oh, and Alexandra, hello. But Hans, it could make sense, depends on what you're doing, but I would say normally it does not make sense because AngularFire has integrations with, I believe, every single web SDK now. So that's a lot of stuff that you would import all at once. So we would recommend against doing that and try to figure out ways to import them through children components. And so if you don't need Firestore, like I don't need Firestore in this case for the landing page component or anything in the app module, I'm going to load that in the child component or in the lazy loaded, you know, child projects component. So projects needs Firestore and auth, so it imports those. But that's one package I can get away with not loading, so it's less. And then the great thing about that too is I don't need it till later if you're a new user or going through the login page. So that makes that login page a little lighter. So it just depends on your need. One of the things we're really interested in doing, and we've been doing some research going forward, is making it a lot easier to lazy load Firebase or AngularFire modules. So we would allow you to include a module, but it would really be like a shell of a module, and it would call out and lazy load. And so that would take a lot of stuff out of the main chunk. And then lazy loading itself doesn't really like solve everything. Lazy loading is just a really nice tool when you set your app up correctly to be lazy loaded. So a good example of that would be, let's say I want to render a whole list of, let's say I have this Kanban app that I've been building. And so I can have data immediately available locally and or have the shell of the app available locally. And if I'm lazy loading Firestore, that app's going to appear quickly. And then I could even maybe have like the initial state data like rendered through Angular Universal. So the user's able to start using the app, and Firestore is completely still loading in the background. And then when Firestore does load, it starts to sync it, and then it kind of catches up and reconciles what the user has done. And then the user doesn't notice. They don't skip it, you know, everything just kind of keeps going. And they didn't notice that we were kind of gracefully loading things in. So that was a really long way of answering that, but I hope you know. And we're trying to make that easier. All right, so I'm going to go keep moving ahead with this project. So, oh, there's one thing I need to do. I wish I had like a control panel for this, but I need to retweet my own tweet and be like, hey, I'm live, everybody. Come join us, because this is a party in here. So we are live. All right. Now let's share the screen. So share screen, and I'm going to go to the app. All right, so here's our app. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click sign up. That calls me out. I've already logged in, so I don't have to do the click. But then when we get logged in, boom, we're moved right to the page, and we can do all of our stuff. So that's really cool. But what this has not given us is if we go, we want to, I should have shown this first, but if I don't have my sign out done. So what I'm going to do really quick to not have to switch the screen is I'm going to call sign out and just on ng on init, and then that will sign me out. And then I can show you how to how we're going to be able to protect the route. So AF dot, let's sign out. So it's going to refresh the page. All right, so we are now signed out. And then let's comment that back out so bad things don't happen. Should refresh the page again. And then now what we want to do is we want to go to project/AngularFire Live, and it lets us. And that's not cool. I don't want, I want this route to be protected, even though I am not logged in. So, which you can't see that I didn't log in, but it's called logout. But you can trust me, I am not logged in right now, and I'm able to go to this page. But what I'd like to do is just to be totally kicked out. Now, this data also is not secured. So with your security rules, that's probably next episode or the one after that. So let's create an AngularFire route guard. So before I go back into the code, let me check the comments. All right, so Gerbani says, hello, sir, I need help regarding background service and Android using Firebase. Is it possible? I am not an Android expert, but it is possible. You can run background processes with Firebase. You really want to be cognizant of what you're doing and how that's going to affect the user's battery, because when does that end? Like I say, not the expert here, but it is possible. But I'm not going to be able to fully get into that here because it's not my bag. But there's lots of great people like Sam Stern. He's amazing Firebase and Android person. Andreas says, many people always ask me about AngularFire and promises. Oh, why it returns promises in some cases instead of observable. I think that used to, and Alexandre just mentioned that too, that used to be a thing. I don't think that's a thing anymore. The reason why that used to happen was because we would proxy out, or we would just shell out to the core SDK. And so instead of having to reproduce the method, we would just give you the method. So you would call a certain method, and it would actually, I still do that today. Actually, I just realized I just did it. And that is why, because we shell out to the core SDK. So like when I call get redirect results, that returns a promise. It could return an observable, but that would just be, making that promise be an observable, just so it's an observable, but it's actually a promise. So promises in this case, this is transactional. It does happen or it doesn't happen. So it's a pretty good fit for a promise. And also, if you try to change something that was designed to be a promise to an observable, it can get kind of wonky at times. That's fine if you're trying to interact with other observables and you're aware of that. But we don't want to change the nature of certain methods like get redirect result. We could map that to an observable, but it doesn't make total sense there. If we might want to revisit that later and figure out maybe, oh, it does make sense for that to be an observable. A lot of people want to, like put that in a chain of observable chain, like .pipe this and that. So it's a great question, though. It probably is confusing from the outside, being like, why is this observable? Why is this a promise? All right, so let me add this is the first time I'm kind of going back and forth between the screens. I can't share more than one screen, which I wish I could. All right, so here we are. So now we're back in. See, I was calling sign out down here. And what we want to do now is we want to go into our app routing module. And so app routing, what we'll do in here, since we're an app component, we have all the modules we need imported. We'll say import from Angular/Fire/auth-guard. And that will give us a bunch of different things. So we get the AngularFire auth guard, that's the most important. But then we also get things like redirect unauthorized to. And so what we would do is we find the route, so project/project ID in this case, and this is the route we want to secure. We say, if you are not a logged in user, no, you're not allowed here. And even better yet, you have to go to another page. In this case, we'd want to send them to the landing page component. So we can do that with Angular's CanActivate. And this route activation, we can say you can activate if you meet the criteria of an AngularFire auth guard, which its criteria is just, are you a logged in user? So if you are a logged in user, you are allowed to go to this page. And And then also we further down the line, we can further customize it to say, or to further say, hey, you don't belong to this page if you don't have the security rules, but we don't have the security rules right now, so we're gonna do that one later. And though this doesn't say, this says you can only activate this route if you are logged in, it does not say what to do afterwards. And that's what this redirect unauthorized to helper does. And so I like to come up to the top and break it out into a method. And so I like to call it redirect unauthorized to, in this case, will be landing or to home or to index. And this is a function that returns a call to here, which is very similar to the router. So it's an array of strings, but in this case, it's just, I think, just home. But this could be whatever you need. It could be like, a slash login page or a, I don't know why you do 404. That just sounds mean, but you could do that. So whatever you need. And so now in here, I'm going to write data. So this is how we further customize it. And how do I forget this? I think it's auth guard pipe. And then that takes this in. I'm going to have to cheat. I always forget. It is auth guard pipe. I remembered it. All right, cool. Auth guard pipe. And this right here will say, hey, if you're not, if you're not logged in, I'm going to go look at this, and I'm going to call this method, which is going to tell me to redirect to home. So let's save that and make sure the build is good. Rebuilt pretty quickly, so I'm going to go back. Let's check out some of the questions here. Stop sharing my screen really quick. Hans says, your opinion on NGRX with AngularFire. So I did a whole talk on that maybe, I guess, yeah, it's April. So it was like 2 years ago. I went to, it was a fun day. I flew into Mountain View. I live outside of the Bay Area. So I flew into Mountain View for the day, and I went and I recorded a bunch of videos for Firebase. And then that night I went to Angular MTV, and I gave a whole talk on how to use AngularFire with NGRX. And that, to me, is a really interesting mix between the two, because they both have really similar philosophies. And while you would think that since they have very similar beliefs, that they would integrate really well together out of the box, it's actually not totally the case, because since they do have really similar philosophies, they sometimes try to do the same things over and over again, or they duplicate efforts. And so sort of like the bad word with NGRX, is boilerplate. But I think that a cause of boilerplate in most Redux applications is duplication of effort. And so it takes a lot. It's the same thing like with CSS. If you're really, strict with your CSS, you can get a lot into just a little bit of CSS. But if you don't think about it, you can have classes everywhere and duplications, and then things start, and then you're like, oh, there's all this CSS boilerplate or all this CSS kudzu or whatever. So the same thing with NGRX. And with Firebase, that can really be the case, because if you think about the things that something like Firestore does, Firestore has the Redux model in mind already. What I will call a, dot value changes. And then that effectively is like calling a select. And then if I want to save data, I would call .set on, or .add on the ref or something like that. And that does that whole, it's like running a dispatch of an action. And then the reducer happens behind the scenes. You get everything back as an array. So you don't have to reduce that one object to return to the new array as you would with just regular NGRX. Firestore handles all that for you. So it's interesting that a lot of times you'll see people write all these action reducer and selectors for every single AngularFire method, and it just becomes extremely cumbersome. So what I did was I showed sort of that flow, and then I also showed how you can use just arcs.js to merge these two together. So you kind of break the two in your head. You have local state and remote state. So most of your Firebase state is remote, so like my list of to-dos, but local state will be like, is the menu open or something like that, something you would not usually save in a database. And so what you can do though is you can use an observable to merge them together, and effectively that becomes a selector, and then that just gets given to the component, and the component doesn't care if one part came from AngularFire and one part came from local or wherever. And so NGRX for local state, remote state is remote state would be AngularFire, and you just use NGRX to tie them together. So that's how you do that, Hans. Thank you for asking. All right, so May, hi, can you do something with custom claims like roles? I could, and there is a whole helper for that. I did not, so I practice these before I come because I want to give you the best performance possible, and I don't want to bomb like crazy on stage. So I can prepare one. I could get creative. I don't have a custom claim to use right now, but that's a really great one. So maybe in the next one. So stay tuned. Let's see here. Patrick, what is the parameter of redirect unauthorized? A URL or a component? A URL. So, or like the local URL or path, I think, whatever Angular calls it. It's the same thing when you call router.navigate. It's the same, whatever that thing is called. I think it's a path. Alexandre, a Boolean of array for redirects. Yeah, you see, Alexandre, got you. And then Patrick says, I meant for the example he just showed. Yes, that's so, yeah. All right, that's good. I like it. They're all talking to each other. And then, all right, cool. Everybody else just saying thanks. Positive chat. Awesome. All right, so now I got to remember what I was doing before I answered all these things. So we are now going to, oh yeah, I'm going to show you in the browser that this thing works. I should probably do the demo first and then answer questions. Okay, I don't know. Well, let's move on. I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to go to the Kanban app, share. All right, cool. So we are in business here. So let's now go click on sign up, because that will, oh, I should not have done that. Facepalm. Well, sign up still works. So that's going to allow us to go there. So I need to sign us out again. So I'm just going to, I do this every single time. I don't know if anyone else does things like this where they keep shooting themselves in the foot and they know they could fix it. I never had a sign out button, like ever. And every time I always regret it. All right, so I'm going to go back to the landing page and I'm going to call this.afauth.sign out. You can't see this, but I don't want to spend the time here. And I'll even log the result to the console. So console.log out. Save. And we'll refresh this page. But let's go to the home. And now opening up the console. Out. That's my logged out. All right, so now what we want to do is I need to remove that sign out because things will get hairy if I'm trying to sign in and sign out all the time. All right, so I'm signed out. And so now let's try to go to that route. And boom, something's right back home. So that's a really awesome way to protect the route is you just add in the AngularFireAuth guard to say what can be activated, and then using the redirect unauthorized to say if you can't belong, that's where you go. So that is how we log a user in, how we secure the route, but there is one more aspect to this. So the last aspect I want to cover is resolving users. So this is something I've been a huge fan of doing ever since the AngularJS days. So a big frustration of mine when I'm building the UI of the components is that I have a let's see how to say. So like let's say I have something asynchronous, whether back in the AngularJS days was a promise or it's an observable. And like in this case, I want to get the user back. There's a lot of, if this is here, then do this, or if this one is loading, then do that. And so there's a lot of just, have these two states in mind. And for some things that's important and you can't get away from that because, because you do want to show two states. But for other things, in this case, like the user, I don't want to show another state. I just want the user to exist. And then I would like it, in this case, if since I'm getting the user back asynchronously, if we could just really wait for the component to resolve or the user to resolve before the component starts to render. So we can use an Angular or an Angular route resolver for that says, hey, when this user exists, just inject that into, or provide it as the data of the route. And then that way it just exists and we synchronously, and just makes it much easier to write your template code and just reason about, there's no if it doesn't exist, if it doesn't, if it does. Oh yes, James is in the chat to help me with my AngularFire questions. Yes, thank you, James. And Patrick, oh, thank you, Patrick. That is, I did enjoy that with Jeff. When we tentatively, don't totally hold me to it, but because I haven't fully confirmed it yet, we believe that we're going to do that again on Thursday. So if you liked it, we're hoping that only get better as we go along. And let's scroll back up. Oh, Pawinder, good to see you. Is there any way to use using the real-time database with PHP? Yes. There is. There's an admin SDK, I believe, supports PHP. Can't remember off the top of my head. And you can do lots of cool stuff with that. I don't believe, actually, no, I believe, I have to check that out. Maybe that'd be an episode. And then also you could run that in Cloud Run. It's a serverless container environment that integrates with Firebase hosting, and you could run a whole PHP server and like Laravel or something like that, and then just, yeah, and render it back to Firebase hosting. That might be a good episode. I'll have to try. I'm not a big PHP expert. I haven't done it since pretty much my college days. But yeah. And Chris Broadfoot, I can't help with questions. You're smarter than you think, Chris. And Todd, cheers. I hope you're doing all well in Utah. All right. I think I got up on all the questions. All right, great. Oh, wait, no, sorry. Can AngularFire be used with multiple resolvers? I'm not sure how that will work, how Angular will work with the multiple resolvers. You can still resolve, I guess you could, but you also could just use one resolver just to resolve it all into one. That'd be like state. That might be the preferred way. I haven't really tried it because I usually just resolve everything through one. So my guess is yes. I don't know. We'll have to, we could test it actually. Troy, that's a really great question. Oh, and then James says, absolutely. I'm sure that there's some nuance because of the way it waits for it to resolve. Let's say I resolved multiple roles and permissions. So anything that's like co-located state, I would just use an observable to, switch map or whatever through, and I wouldn't probably switch map for resolve because it waits for multiple connections. But you would merge map your way to like another observable and then sort of flatten them all into one piece of state. And then that would probably be the way to do multiple ones if the logic is related to each other, or the state is related to each other. You want them to come from the same observable. And observables make stuff like that very easy. But I don't know, maybe I might do some like local of something while we test around. All right, so let me share my screen. By the way, let me know how you think this is going. Do you like that I go really, just focus on the code, can't see your comments, and then take the break? I feel like this is easier for me. I'm not thinking about both at the same time, but I would like you all to tell me if you think if this is a good way of going about it, or if you're waiting for your question, like, come on, man. The question's important to the code you're writing. I need to know it now. So just let me know. I would like to do this the best way possible, even though that's not really a thing. All right, so let's go back into the app. And here we are. So here on the app, and what I want to do now is the resolver. All right, so the way resolvers work is we need to import injectable from core because resolvers are injectable. And then nothing from AngularFireAuth, but we need, where is it? Resolver from Angular core. So resolver. Is that it? Oh, no, it's from route. That's why I knew I was doing something wrong. Let's see here. All right, so resolver, or is it resolve? Resolve. Okay. All right, great. And so, this is on the, that's why I'm confused. I'm on the landing page component. I do not want to do that here. I'm just going to be a little bit lazy and not break it out into its own route. I'm just going to do it at the top of this file, but I'd probably just store it in this. Maybe I put in like a shared module so other ones can use it, but I'm just going to put it here for now. So inside of core, that's where I will do injectable. And then I have the router right here. And so resolve. And what we want to do right in here is we have All right, so let's write our resolver. Just trying to get my head about me here. And so we'll start by using injectable just to get the class going, and then class, I'm going to call it Firebase user resolver. So that's what it does. It resolves a Firebase user. And resolvers are really simple in theory. There's the resolver itself is really simple. Your data or what you're trying to resolve back from it may not be so simple. And there could be some confusions of why it's not working at first. And I will show you exactly what I mean by that. So let's do a constructor because we will want to do some dependency injection. So really the only two things you need are constructor and then a method called resolve. And what I believe with resolver is you can, yes, you'd say resolver implements resolve. And then this has to take in what the observable, and I believe it can accept the promise too, but I haven't done that. You would say observable of, and in this case, it's a firebase.user. And make sure I get, capital U user. Yes. And then now resolve is mad because it wants to return a firebase.user or an observable of firebase.user. Now, something to call out here about your types. This is something that I could totally just hand wave over, but I think that this is, potentially very important to understand. So I'm not importing Firebase lines 1 through 5. There's no import stars Firebase from Firebase here, but yet this works. And you may have been, if you're an AngularFire user and this is something that you haven't fully, went deep on because probably shouldn't have to worry too much about stuff like this. But if you're wondering, how can I access Firebase and I'm not importing Firebase? And that's because Firebase has these ambient typings. So I think that's still the word for it. But basically, these are these global typings. I don't think ambient is the word anymore. I was like old school TypeScript. But these global types. And so that's because Firebase can be available on the window. So it, and actually, if possibly, most likely in this case, if I did do a console.log of Firebase in here, while this wouldn't like it because it's like, hey, what's going on? This would likely exist because Firebase initializes itself on the window. And so the typings reflect that by allowing you anywhere where you might be importing Firebase to access its types. That's fine and all, but what I really like to do is I like to make sure I've got myself covered, that I'm not potentially importing Firebase where I don't need to be importing, or anything for that matter. So one of my favorite TypeScript features is something called import types. So I can create a type of Firebase user and then call import like the dynamic import, but it's not the dynamic import. It's just similar syntax. And then I go to my module, so firebase.app, and then I can call, I think it's called .user at this point. Yep. And then now, inside of here, I have a Firebase user. And in this way, I know that this is not actually importing. It's not importing any module. It's just grabbing the types. And this I have a whole blog post I've written about this. It's actually my most popular blog post I ever wrote because it gets good SEO for some reason. I don't know. That's a total accident. But this is a really great way. And so I'll link the blog posts in the description if you're still learning, if you want to learn more about it. But this is a really, really useful feature. And my blog post has all the examples of where it's useful. OK, great. So now we have this Firebase user. We want to return a Firebase user. So we need to import from AngularFireAuth, actually. So let's Alt-Shift down, delete guard, and then just delete all AngularFireAuth. And then now in here, I'll just say private of AF auth is AngularFireAuth. And then now within here, I just need to return this .afauth.user. And this technically makes everything fine. But it actually won't be fine. You would think that, oh, it needs to return observable. This is a return observable of the user. But it's unlike your typical like network call observable. So this .af.auth.user, you'd think this is a network call, which I guess technically this I think underneath the hood, it depends on what time you call it, whether it initializes a network call or not. But if you had some REST API, we were saying to grab just some data back, that would come back. The observable would eventually terminate once the network call was over, the HTTP request was over. With a lot of the Firebase calls, and actually probably all of them, maybe a few, but the vast majority of them, they are not going to terminate ever, because this is continuous listener. It's going to listen when people log in, when people log out, all this different stuff. So you don't want, so this will actually just hang your page. I would actually show you, but I don't want to switch back and forth, just to show you that all it's going to do is give you a white screen. So this, if I set it up, just total white screen. So what we want to do instead is let the resolver know when the user has been resolved. So to do that, we'll use the magic of RxJS. And that right here is called .pipe. And then we are going to filter. We'll import from operators. And then this will return back potentially a user. And then we want to say if user, let's see here, not equal to undefined. And then this right here will make sure that if it's not logged in user, if it's a null user, because sometimes you might get a state where it's initially doesn't pick up their logged in, but then picks up their logged in. You want to filter that initial not one out. And then what you can do is you can take one. Or you could probably first, here, I didn't pick up that, so let's type it in here. I think you can first it, but I remember reading something recently about the difference between first and take one. And one of them is not, it does not give you the right one. Will throw, I believe, and I can't remember which one. So I'm just going to do take one for now. If you know that, and your name's James Daniels, and you probably do know this, let everybody know in the comments. All right, so this right here pretty much says, let's start a subscription for the user, or let's go get the user as an observable. Let's filter out any not authenticated, some null state, and then let's take the first of that. So that will terminate out the observable, because take will unsubscribe you. Which sometimes is very confusing. A lot of people will call take one on a real-time listener from Firestore, a real-time database. So they'll get all the, get the document back or get the array back, take one or something like that. And then they're like, why isn't it continue to update? Because they think it's like getting the top one of like a SQL query or something like that. But it doesn't do that. It's like take the first emission and then, unsubscribe. So that's also a very important thing to know. All right, so now let's go down here. So let's inject it into the this route. And the way this works in is, I believe you type in resolve, and then it's the key you want it to exist on, so user, and then the resolver. So Firebase user resolver. All right, and we are almost there. I said we had to go back to app module just one more time. And that, what we need to do is in app routing is Firebase user resolver, and we have to declare it as a provider. So now I will save everything, which I don't know if you know this, Command Option S, and sorry for Windows users if I'm totally batching your hotkeys. Command Options S will save all your unsaved files. All right. Oh, we got an error. Oh, I should have turned that noise off. Firebase user resolver from /app routing module. Oh, has no exported member. Probably didn't save for save syncing error export class. Let's just, let's go to the app module. And I'm just going to hit enter so it saves. And probably good now, because I think, yeah, it was just how it saved. So basically, I did the save. I saved first on that module before I saved all. All right, so it didn't pick up those changes. So let me go back to the browser, and then, oh wait, but no, there's one thing I have not done yet. I need to go into the landing page component, and I need to import the activated route. So we resolve it, but we're not actually doing anything with that resolution. We're not doing anything with that user data. And so we want to actually get it back. And we can do that from the activated route service or provider. I'm not sure what to call that. But the way that works is we say this dot route dot snapshot dot data, which is different than dot data, I believe, is an observable. Yes, an observable, which is cool that you can actually, start an observable sync. But a lot of people, if you're resolving it because you don't want to deal with the asynchronous nature, then you call into .snapshot. So it's actually really awesome that Angular provides both mechanisms. And then .data, you can't just call .user because it's this like data type, but it's this type called data, and I believe it's in. Oh, it does let you call data. Oh, does it pick it up dynamically? No, I don't know. I had problems with this earlier. I guess it's letting me now. Let's just console.log this. You can always index it though if it ever gives you problems, which is to use the like array bracket string. So let's just log the data. Let's save. Let's make sure that this works. We are in business there. And now let me go back and let me stop this and switch. Let me read some of the questions. Let's see. Man, James, you are rocking it in the comments. Let's see here. Awesome. Now I don't have to. Yes, look at that. Man. All right. James, you look like you got me covered. And I got to finish in 10 minutes, but we're at the finish line. All right. So let me go and share my screen now to show you that that user is resolved. Crossing my fingers for that. All right. Share screen. And let's go into here, and it does not look promising. Let's go into the console. I hope there's an error. No error. That was I believe it probably has to do with something with the way I am taking. So, all right, let's go into the editor and figure out. So, well, I did get to show you the white screen after all. It's probably with the way I'm taking, but so now we're going to turn this into a live debugging session. So let me pull up the code editor. This is always fun when things don't work. Share screen, application window, and let's go back into here. All right, so what we're going to do now is .route.snapshot.data. All right, that's good. Let's go back into app routing module and resolve user Firebase user resolver. And what I want to do is probably drop a debugger into the, I believe that's what I'd want to do. So this .user.pipe take user not able to find take one. Let's see here. All right, and let's do the first smart thing. Let's drop a debugger in here just to see if it works. I'm not going to totally switch back because I don't want to switch, but I'll let you know if it. All right, so we get dropped in the debugger. Just imagine we're being dropped in the debugger. And everything looks good. So I'm going to drop a breakpoint into filter just to see if that's ever emitting. And let's see here. Come on. Here we go. All right, so that user is null. Oh, I wonder if we're not logged in. Oh, yes, that's a thing. Yes. Okay, here we go. Interesting. All right, so let's do this. This is going to make things kind of wonky, but I don't have much time left, and we'll fix this in the next episode. So save that. And now what we're going to do is this should work. All right. Even though it won't fully, it's not bulletproof. So let's share the screen now. Right, so share to the here. All right, cool. So we have a page now. So that's great. So what was happening is we weren't logged in because I was demoing to you what happens when you're not logged in. So in this case, to show that we're not logged in, try to go to the project and kicks us back. So we're not logged in. That would have been so bad if it would have loaded. I would have been like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. But I do, I think. All right, so now we are logged in. It's going to redirect us to that page, but let's go back. And now go and check the console, get this object, and here's our user. Now, this is a lot of data. I usually map over this, but you can see display name, all this stuff exists. And so what I'd like to do, I don't have the time to totally do it yet, is I would probably not, I'd either take two philosophical approaches here. One, I would create resolvers that would be guaranteed if the user exists, and one that if the user did not exist. And so you'd have to write some trickery there. Because effectively you would want to make sure that that user, you could take two, maybe there's a couple things you could try doing to make sure that would work. But you want to be cognizant if that user is coming to a page where they're guaranteed to be logged in, as in it's a protected route. So like I could have done this on the projects page, which is probably what I should have done. Then I can take one, I can filter out a null user. It's not going to be a big deal because that user is always going to be logged in. So yeah. That is all the time I have stuff for today. That was action-packed. So on today's episode of AngularFire Live, what did we learn? We learned a lot. We answered lots of questions, talked about lots of things. And one of the things that we added authentication into this Kanban app, and we were using AngularFireAuth to log users in with Google. And we learned that when you sign in users with a redirect, you need to use get redirect results because you have to go out to the app or out to the provider's page and back to yours. And we check to see if that user has come in through the app through a redirect. From there, we can navigate them to their provided page. And then that, though, does not secure the page. So to secure the page, we use the AngularFireAuth guard module. And we have AngularFireAuth guard, which we provide as a CanActivate helper that tells you that if to activate this route, you must be logged in. And then we use the data helpers or all the other route helpers. So redirect unauthorized to and stuff like that. And that allows us to say, you're not logged in, you can't be here, but you go here. And then resolvers, we can resolve users in. So that way we don't have to worry about reading users asynchronously. We can just template them to the app and no more loading states to manage. So that is all. I got a couple more minutes left. James Daniels crushing it in the comments, which is just very helpful. Thank you, James. And if any of you have any questions, I guess I'll awkwardly wait 15 seconds for you to hear that and then perhaps ask a question. Let me just go back and read some of these things. James, you did a great job covering this. Let's see here. The idea is our route guards are a bit more magic and save you the effort of integrating AngularFire into the router. Yes, it's true. I was really excited when we finally did the AngularFire auth guard module because that was something I used to write by hand all the time. And the user resolver, now that I'm thinking about it, James, maybe this should be a new feature. But it's really nice to be able to protect routes. And what I showed is really a small amount. James is one who built that feature, and the amount of stuff you can do with it, super flexible. It's really great. It's just nice to be able to drop in a couple lines of code, where before you'd have to create a CanActivate helper or a guard basically, and you would have to implement its methods and figure out all that stuff. And it was, it's not actually very hard, but it's very easy. It's always very easy to fuck on yourself or just do one little thing wrong and then you're stuck, just like I showed you today. So yes, I'm a big fan. Everyone said I did a great job. Oh, any issue using SSR with resolvers? I actually don't know. I don't think I've ever done an SSR in resolver one, but unless you're calling like document.getElementById or something like that, probably should be fine. I believe the way that AngularFire works with zones, it will know that needs to be run before it's terminated, so it should work. Auth doesn't have an SSR, so lots of things to worry about there. But yeah, I was thinking resolver should be fine. Issue auth on the server is weird because auth itself is written to be run in a browser context because of things like redirects and stuff like that. It's very aware of the stuff the browser is doing. So there's lots of browser-specific code in the Auth SDK. But there are definitely ways around it. And James is the expert there. So I think you should be good, Troy. And then Alexandra said would like to see the custom claims stuff next time. All right, maybe I have to bring James in. James is the one who's really good at the custom claims. Yeah, cookie auth might work. That's what I was thinking as well with cookie auth, which is also something I want to cover. A lot of people ask that question. So yeah, next time, so we did auth, so we got logged in, we got a real-time syncing board, we got logged in users, but we got completely unprotected data, which is not good. So let's maybe in the next episode, if you want to see something specific with the app, just let me know on Twitter or this one _ David East, and yeah. Let me know, but I think I'm going to do security rules because there's a lot of really cool things. I probably could do role-based authentication system with security rules, which is so there's admins and editors and all sorts of things. So that is all. Thank you all, and I will see you on the next episode of Angular and Firebase Live. End broadcast.